You got Notre Dame and Penn State in the Orange Bowl. What do you need from each quarterback, whether it's Notre Dame or Penn State, whether it's Riley Leonard or Drew Allar, to be able to win the ball game and advance the national championship game? We'll talk about it right now, but first things first, make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. College football, nothing but college football all year long. This show presented by PrizePicks. All right, now PrizePicks Daily Fantasy made easy to use, easy to play, and whether you win or not, doesn't matter. When you use code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups gets you $50 in promo funds. Got a couple of squares I want to talk about with y'all. So here's the prompt we addressed at the top of this thing. What are you asking from each quarterback? I think the way it looks will be different, but I think the role overall for both these guys is pretty similar. And that role is, hey, be timely. Be timely. Don't be the reason we lose this football game. At the same exact time now, we're not going to ask you to carry us, but we do need you to make some plays here in crunch time when it's put up or shut up, chips on the table, fourth and whatever. We need you to make the play. And so for Drew Allar, man, timely for him may look like 270. It could look like 170 through the air. The thing with him is I don't think it's a situation where Penn State just runs for 250 plus all the way to punch their ticket to the national championship. I think Penn State, or Notre Dame's defense rather, is too good up front. But I definitely don't think this is a situation where Drew Allar just sits back and has a game manager kind of day. Again, not statistically speaking. I'm talking about from what you ask of him. Because against Boise State now, he didn't go for over 300 yards, but he made some throws there in the back of the end zone to Tyler Warren where if he didn't put it where he put it, things maybe could have gone differently on that drive. Now, I do think Penn State still beats Boise State because of the overall talent gap, but you hear what I'm saying. For Drew Allar in this spot now, need him to be timely, need him to be dialed in, especially downfield. When you have those safeties creep up, when you're able to command some extra attention in the box, you can't leave money on the table. Just what I said at the top of this thing. Now, for Riley Leonard, for him, I think it's more so a thing of, hey, let's bring the off-road tires a little bit here in this Orange Bowl, but don't crash the car. Like for him, I'm looking a lot more at his stat line being a little bit more murky and mucky and, dare I say, ugly. You know what's not ugly? A win. All right, so for him, I think it needs to be a situation where third and short, I said this in our game preview, every third down needs to be within a designed quarterback run of Riley Leonard getting that first down. Okay, I don't think he needs to run for over 100 yards, but I do think he needs to have a factor in this game with his legs. So the squares like for both these quarterbacks now. For Drew Allar, I told you, I don't think it's going to be a 300-yard kind of day. His number at PrizePicks for pass yards is set at 185. We'll lean less there. Again, not because we doubt Drew Allar, but because of how good this Notre Dame secondary is. They're allowing 167 a game. I have reservations about anyone besides Tyler Warren being able to consistently separate. 184 could be good enough for them to win the football game, but we'll take the less than on the 185. And then for Riley Leonard, I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit frisky here. We'll take the rushing touchdown. He's got 0.5 listed at PrizePicks.com for a rushing or receiving touchdown. We'll take the more there. So we think Riley Leonard finds his way back into the paint. Has only done it now 2 of the last 5 games for Notre Dame. He had a nice little 8-game streak, though, during the regular season, per stats by Cato. It's going to be a fun one, man. So to break this down even further, I mentioned Cato earlier, just a moment ago. Let's bring on the man, the myth, the legend, who tore his Achilles, returned back 6 months later. Take that, Aaron Rodgers. Cato, what do you like in this game, man?
First of all, it's 5.5 months. Want to clarify that there.
Talk your cash.
No shade at the Enigma, but no, I agree with you. I think a lot of what we'll see in this game will, breaking news, be predicated by the quarterbacks. And obviously both of these quarterbacks are being asked such different things. You have a Drew Allar who's going to need some help from his pass catchers a lot more and have more, I think, pressure there compared to a Riley Leonard who is going to probably do more with his legs. But I think in this matchup, Drew Allar's legs have kind of become under-talked about, kind of put under the rug. When you look at him, he's a lot more mobile than you think. He's a big guy at 6'6". I think he's made quite a few plays with his legs this year, and I think when you look at the biggest games of the year, he's definitely came through as far as making plays with his legs. When you talk about from a PrizePicks perspective, I've never played this square before, but I think I will this weekend. Longest rush, 10.5 yards. I'll take the over there with Drew Allar, and you look at every time he's done that, it's been in the biggest games. 15-yard rush last game, 13 in the round before that, 20 22 in the Big Ten championship against USC in that overtime thriller, 19-yard rush in that game. I think even the Ohio State game, 14-yard rush there. So I think this is another big moment where the defense, in the kind of scheme of the game, in the flow of the game, they might forget about Drew's legs and don't account for that as much, and he takes off for one of those bigger runs, a first down run. I think when you get to the postseason, the biggest ball of the year, I would look for Drew Allar maybe ripping off a big run. So that's definitely one of the squares I like when you're talking about both of these quarterbacks.
You and I were talking during the Big Ten title game. We're texting back and forth. And Drew Allar is shaking and baking. He's making guys miss a little bit or just kind of willing himself to get some forward progress throughout the course of that game against Oregon. Obviously, they fell short, but we left that game being like, hey, Drew Allar's got some Ben Roethlisberger to him. He's got a little bit of that Big Ben quality. I love that. I love that square. I think you're on the money there. I think, honestly, quite frankly, in this game, with how often Notre Dame brings pressure, 45% of the time, the most in America, I think you might need some of that. Because I think for Penn State, we talked about, I don't think they can afford, for either of these teams, quite frankly, to get behind the sticks too much. For Riley Leonard, I'm curious how much they try to run him. Because the number over at PrizePicks is 12 rush attempts. Thought about pulling the trigger there, couldn't bring myself to do it. Because on one hand, you're like, hey, Riley, it's the playoffs, man. We see him jumping over dudes against Georgia. He clearly has no issue running the football or having a willingness to run the football. But also throughout the course of the year and in this game, you're like, man, we don't know if we really want to ask our quarterback to run it more than 12 times to give us a chance to win. So the back and forth here between the quarterback mobility is going to be super, super intriguing.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same thing when I was talking about the Drew Allar legs being a little bit underrated. I think Riley Leonard's arm isn't necessarily underrated, but I think the amount of times he throws the ball is a little bit. You talk about his game last week where he throws for 90 yards. I would definitely stay away from his passing yardage just for that alone. But the flow of the game and the way it felt like he threw the ball a lot less, but he actually threw the ball 24 times. And you look at his PrizePicks line here, 27 pass attempts. I'll take the more there. I think if they maybe don't take a kickoff back for a touchdown in that game, maybe he throws the ball 3 more times. That's kind of a drive that he wasn't able to get. And even with the flow of that game being on top of Georgia, not necessarily having to throw a ball a lot, he still threw the ball 24 times in that game. I think in this game, I favor Penn State personally. So I think there is a scenario where they are up a little bit in the second half and maybe he does have to throw the ball more. So I like his pass attempts there. And then you know me, JD, a Green Goblin is something I cannot resist. Drew Allar at 149 yards in the Green Goblin. We'll take the over there. He's done that in 6 of the last 7 games. So that's the 3 squares I like there if you take those 2 and also add Drew Allar's longest rush of the day at 10.5 yards.
Yeah, for those of y'all that are new to the PrizePicks programming we do here, Cato has been feasting on the Green Goblin. So if you take no other picks from this segment and you just want to go with who has the highest hit rate, if you will, the Green Goblin square in Cato is usually a pretty good way to go about it. You mentioned your pick in this one. Penn State's still the lean as we sit here early on in the week.
Yeah, I think it is, JD. I think, like we've talked about before, about the styles of these games, I think when you look at a personnel standpoint, I think Penn State's a little bit more of an obvious pick, more talent at the premier positions when you're looking at the edge rushers, the quarterback, the running backs. But then when you look at just the DNA, if you cut open Notre Dame right now and look inside of them, man, it's hard not to get behind what they did in that Georgia game, a tough, gritty team that traditionally has that playoff success. So I think, like a lot of other people, I could see this one going either way. But I picked Penn State from the jump. I'm going to stick with them right now, and I think they're going to be in the national championship just given their talent. I thought, before picking them over Georgia in my hypothetical bracket would just say more about, I think they're more talented at quarterback. You have a backup quarterback there at Georgia. You put in Notre Dame in that equation, you think on paper, I feel better about this team. They haven't competed in 2 of the last 3 national championships and won them, but Notre Dame went toe-to-toe with Georgia. They have a more experienced quarterback, and they're a tough, gritty team, man. But I think Penn State, with the talent, I think a big game for Drew Allar, a big game for that defense. I think they pull it out barely in this matchup.
You know what's so funny is a lot of us now are getting to see more of Drew Allar. We saw him during the season, obviously, but we're seeing him on these big stages. And last year kind of got a bad rap. Maybe it's him, maybe it's the OC, maybe it's the weapons, who knows. But as we see more of him, Cato, I can't help but feel like, hey, Drew Allar hasn't been the problem, at least this year in the few games that we've seen in this college football playoff. He wasn't the issue if he's throwing the football around like that. There was a drive at the end of the first half against Boise State where he's just dealing frozen ropes, absolute seeds. And I think 2 of them were dropped. He would have easily surpassed the 200-yard mark if either of those were caught. And so I wonder now, I don't really have that much of a reservation around Drew Allar. It's more so hey, if anybody outside of Tyler Warren and that beautiful bucket of lettuce, can anybody else get open and catch the football for my guy, you know?
Yeah, and that's definitely going to be a huge test against this Notre Dame defense that you love, that you drafted in our draft before, and it's aging like absolute fine wine. And I think that's going to be a key matchup. You look at the growing up moment, I think, for Drew Allar was against USC. You saw him in that overtime thriller, will his team back on the road converting long fourth downs. And in that game, his weapons did come up for him. They came up big. They made timely key catches. And I think you can get away with some of those drops maybe in the Boise State game against an opponent like that. But then you get into that semifinal round, you're going against a juggernaut on defense with Notre Dame and those guys over there. You're going to need those guys to step up. So I think that's going to be a point of emphasis at practice. And I think that's something you could get out of more than those guys. They have some talent in those rooms. They've just been underachieving like they have been the last couple of years. I think for Notre Dame to win, they're going to need a lot more of things we haven't seen really at all this year against top competition from their offensive weapons. We've talked about Faison coming into the fold, Jeremiah Love being injured and just kind of questionable as far as being sick or having a knee injury. That's a little scary to me. So I think Penn State could be a little bit more of themselves and win this game versus Notre Dame. They would maybe need some more in between the margins for some of those skill players and some of those other positions they haven't necessarily performed at the highest level this year to win this one.
It's so funny because we are working on a segment of the top 10 players in this game. As I'm putting it together, I'm like, okay, Penn State guy here, Penn State guy, Penn State guy. And I'm like, that's a lot of Nittany lines in the top 10. And I'm also sitting here saying, I think there's probably more ways for Penn State to win the football game. And then I'm also sitting here saying, I'm taking Notre Dame. So the good news is, Cato's taking Penn State. I'm taking the Irish. One of us is going to be right, so the hard count will have a correct prediction from the program in the college football playoff. So I'm looking forward to that. Cato, the absolute man. Appreciate you making us all smarter with your intelligence and intellect and just insight into the game of football. Appreciate y'all being dialed in. Make sure you're subscribed on your way out. Again, code HARDCOUNT, $5 in lineups, $50 in promo funds. Go lock that in, and we'll have ourselves a college football playoff semifinal. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time.